All right, what is happening, everybody? I'm back with B. This will be episode number 2 on April 17th, 2025, another painfully beautiful production. And I am your host, D. Boomason. Just wanted to do that just for fun. So what's happening, Biscuits? We got episode 2 here, man. There was a lot of things we didn't get to in episode 1. So if people haven't seen episode 1, you can go back and watch that. But now we're going to get into some nitty gritty on episode 2 here, and I'm going to kind of let you just guide the path, brother. Go ahead and say hi, and let's get started. I know people want to hear about the vaccines, the swabs, and all this stuff that we had intended to get to in episide 1, and now here we go. So go ahead, brother.
Well, thanks for having me back. I appreciate it. It's good to see you again. I didn't do a very good job on the first time of sticking to the things that we had kind of laid out that we were going to talk about. Or I guess I stuck to them, but we just ran way long on every one.
Yeah, it's funny. We pulled stuff up on the screen and then started talking about other stuff. And so I think you just have had all this stuff on your mind for probably years now. And so getting it out it's important, man. But I love organic thought, and then nothing, being necessarily scripted and just going for it.
Yeah, same. Well, it's interesting. What I discovered, I have had this stuff. Excuse me. You'll see like the dates and things on these files as we go through them. From they're contemporary to November. October, November, December of 2020. The files these communications between Pfizer and the regulatory authorities, the EMA, the European Medicines Agency, and the FDA. And so, all throughout 2021, I was trying to share these things, like I said yesterday, and getting, at that time, because it's contemporary and because it's relevant, much like the Hunter Biden laptop thing,
right?
The full sort of weight of the opposition to it is in play. The 51 intelligence agents, and all of the media and all of the shills and all of the AI, the Hive AI type moderation softwares are fully focused on shutting that particular topic down, or the Pfizer stuff, shutting it down. So, I mean, in a lot of ways, the only choice you really have in terms of disseminating information like this on a large scale, if the media and all of these organizations are engaged in actively shutting down the topic.
And we know for a fact that was happening. Both Zuckerberg, I believe, has said that. And then we both know, because of the Twitter files, that the government was literally in with social media, especially the large ones.
Well, you didn't need if you were trying to share it at the time, I can assure you don't need Mark Zuckerberg to tell you, or the Twitter files, because I mean, you find out first that you've been shut down. You know what I mean?
You're, like I said in the first one, you're probably the most, one of the most, we'll just say one of the most, because who knows, there's a lot of people that are probably trying to do this. You're one of the most banned people, if not right at the top there, because you literally only have Truth Social that has lasted.
Right. And I mean, I posted this stuff on Truth Social, but the thing about Truth Social is it sucks. In terms of an the Thread organization, in terms of indexing, I mean, if you want to search Truth Social,
right.
It's not easy. It's not really conducive. Even your own account, it's tough to go back through and find what you posted, 2 years ago or whatever. Everything just gets buried. I mean, in a lot of ways, it is sort of similar to 4chan in that sense. Like, once you post something on there, if it doesn't take off, it kind of just goes away, and nobody will ever find it. But I mean, I have posted, the links to these files and stuff on 4chan, or on Truth Social, and prior to that on 4chan, which is, I heard some of your coffee talk thing this morning, where you're talking about 4chan, and it's funny, like 4chan is dead, and 4chan refugees allegedly killed it. So, I mean, it's sort of like, I guess that's how it works for compromised websites, right? Once once it's sort of run the course, whoever's compromising it just kind of burns it and moves on to the next thing,
Right.
But anyway, so yeah, I mean, there was a very clear and strong opposition to the dissemination of this type of information back then, and you can understand why, I guess. Well, I hope that normal people who are sort of uninitiated into the into the pharmaceutical world, which is super insulated. I mean, like federally regulated industries, whether it's intelligence, law enforcement, pharmaceutical manufacturing, there's very similar sort of barriers for people that are outside to look in and be able to discern what's going on in reality. The lexicon is crazy. I mean, pharma is basically like this. You have to learn this language of acronyms to even participate in a conversation once you enter into that industry. And you find that if you know that lexicon, if you can speak that language, you'll very quickly be able to recognize the people who don't know what the hell they're talking about, because they'll just repeat things that they hear. I mean, this I'm talking in like high-level meetings and stuff. You'll have people that clearly have no idea what the acronyms that they're throwing around actually mean, because if you know the context, you'll be able to say, well, this doesn't make any sense what this person is saying. But it's a great litmus test for how many other people around the table also have no idea what the fuck is going on whenever someone says something that doesn't make sense and then someone else agrees because they think it sounds good. And if you really speak the language, you're just sitting there like, wow, everyone in this meeting besides me is an idiot,
Right. And then I don't really want to cut you off too much, but I call out a lot of grifters. There's a lot of people I followed for various times. You know about Stu Peters, right?
I mean, I've seen a couple posts of his.
So you don't know a whole
on
lot
Truth
about him.
Social. I mean,
It was kind of one of the big accounts. He has a podcast. He first came out, just popped out, and he's like selling socks and stuff. He's known as the guy selling socks. Now he's grown a huge freaking network. I think he has massive backing. That's even been said that it's Jewish
of course,
backing.
A huge network of socks. But yeah,
right.
Go ahead.
So yeah, that's pertinent. Anyways, he was one of the big ones. He's done multiple documentaries talking about clotting in people that took the shots. But he's had various doctors on, some of them that aren't actual doctors, like Dr. Jane Ruby, who's more of a nurse or something. I don't even know. But has on anyways professionals that have talked about this. Then you got guys like Mike Adams, the health ranger. He's been one that's come out and talked about this stuff. And then you have Dr. Artis, who I think we've talked a little bit about as far as like the nicotine and stuff goes. That sounds to be like something that's legit. And I don't know where you want to take this conversation. I just wanted to bring up the problem is that most people don't know this lexicon that you're talking about. They don't know these abbreviations. They don't know what's real and what's not. So you get these talking heads on this podcasting network, especially in the alternative media, and they could say all kinds of crazy shit, and no one would know the wiser.
Yeah. So here's what I want to do, because I think I have my experience in the pharmaceutical industry, I think, was arguably very unique. I mean, I didn't belong in that industry, to be frank with you. And the way that I got into it was sort of, I mean, it was just it's one of those stories, it's weird how it worked out, I guess. But I mean, my background prior to getting into and I mean, I inched into it, I'll say, like when I, back home where I'm from in North Carolina, I started out working on, the way that I got ahead was by working on machinery and equipment and in facilities that were basically, I made more money than most people because I would work on any type of machine. I mean, if it was dangerous, high volt, whatever. I've always been very good with working on machinery, and I've been working on machinery since I was a kid. I mean, probably in violation of a lot of child labor laws, but my dad taught me a lot, and I was around stuff when I was a kid that, I think most adults probably would not feel safe around in general. But I grew up with it, and I think it made me very sharp, and probably combined with the luck of having survived sort of all the near misses that I experienced, it definitely sharpened my mind up in terms of problem solving and being able to, respond in real time to complex situations. But the thing that I found was like, it sucks, in agriculture, the type of big equipment and things like that I've worked on, and that was my bread and butter, I guess. It sucks working for an agricultural client. It sucks working for, small businesses. It sucks working for manufacturing businesses whenever the product they're selling whenever their bottom line isn't great, or whenever their profit margins are pretty thin, because it thins out your own profit margins. But getting a contract for the federal government or with a pharmaceutical company, that's great, because they're flush, and the people that you're dealing with there just want their job to be made easy. So if they've got dangerous equipment that they don't understand, they don't even want to be near, like they don't even have people on staff that wants to go and work around this stuff and be near it or take it apart. And it's also very critical to whatever their operations are. I mean, I'm talking, hospitals that use med gas and waste anesthetic gas disposal systems, breathing air systems. I mean, critical stuff that no one wants to take accountability for.
Right.
Partly because it's dangerous personally, to work on, but partly because it's dangerous professionally if something goes wrong and you're held accountable. So, my entire career basically was, I understood the relationship of accountability and profitability. Like, the more you could responsibly and safely be accountable for, the more you can charge. I mean, that was like, I was like, this is it, right? If I'm comfortable taking accountability for my actions professionally, then, I mean, the sky's the limit. That was my opinion. And honestly, it proved to be true. I mean, because when I moved down to Florida, there was a small pharmaceutical company down here that was going through, these big changes with various investments and things like that, building facilities. And I realized they were in over their head, and they'd made a lot of decisions with purchasing equipment. I mean, to give you a specific example, they purchased a piece of equipment that required steam, provided by a boiler to operate, and the scale, it was going to take like a 250 horsepower boiler or something, which, it would have to run on natural gas, because this was like in a downtown area in the cone of an airport. And, I looked at it and I said, hey, you can't put a boiler into this facility that's going to provide you enough steam without putting a stack up, because it's going to have to go up higher than the buildings next to you. And in order to do that, you're going to be above the height restrictions for the airport. So this, $2 million piece of equipment that you bought, which, by the way, you don't even have a door in your facility big enough to get it through to install it, which you also didn't. These are the kind of decisions that these guys were making. So
that 99% of the population has no idea or thinks about.
Well, maybe, but there's no excuse for the person that was writing those purchase orders for those pieces of equipment to not understand, right?
That's their job.
So this person is now up against it. You see what I'm saying? This person's job is basically on the line because they really have fucked up. And so I said, look, let me see what I can do. I'll look into this for you. I had a consulting business at the time, and I said, I'll come in for these Friday meetings with you, basically, but I wasn't even really interested in going back into like a 9 to 5 type situation at the time. And so I called it then, and fortunately, the piece of equipment that they ordered, the vendor that they ordered it from was a great guy, and I called him up and was just like, hey, listen, here's what's happened. How far along are you in manufacturing this piece of equipment? And he said, well, explain to me where they were. And I said, well, we got to switch it over to electric. Like we can't have we can't have steam heat. Like, we've got to do something else. And so we were able to get it all worked out. And because of that, I solved that one sort of problem. Of course, now the guy who I got out of the trap, so to speak, was like, okay, here's a dude that will take accountability and things, and off my shoulders, right? And
Right.
I said, sure. So, I mean, these guys signed a contract with me that was very good for me, and then it just sort of escalated from there, and I ended up meeting. One of their clients was the small privately owned pharmaceutical company that I later ended up building their entire facility for. So I ended up building this entire facility, supervising the engineering and design and build of this entire facility for that initial company, and that was sold a couple times while I was still under contract with them, dealing with this other client of theirs who I later went to work for, and that was the company that fired me in 2020. So, and that sort of led into I developed a very good understanding over the course of that second project in the early phase of exactly what. And so I paid attention always to, like, okay, where's the accountability in every meeting, in every interaction, right? Like, who's the responsible party? Because otherwise you just end up talking with people that are trying to sound important in their job, just in case anybody's watching, but they're really not going to do anything. And then a lot of the pharmaceutical industry is like that, and a lot of the FDA is like that, and they're like that because they mirror each other. But I always told the employees that I hired for that second project, which ultimately, got the FDA inspections and passed and so on. When the FDA comes, when FDA representatives come to a pharmaceutical manufacturer to do an inspection, when they walk in, what you'll see is chaos. I mean, everybody in the place, the executives, the director level people are just, it just becomes like, oh God, it's like they're getting raided or something, I mean, they start freaking
Right.
out. Everybody's wondering, what is this document? You get, they put together some war room where the documents that the FDA requests have to go through here and be reviewed by all the executives, which is a waste of time because these people have no fucking clue what they're looking at. They have no idea what those documents, the executives from any pharmaceutical company, in my experience, have no fucking clue what any of the documentation says. And you'll see why as we start to get into this stuff, because who would want to? I mean, it's not fun. It's not a fun read. This is not, that the facility that I built and got approved, the 2 years prior to the FDA inspection, it went from nothing to, I leased the building. I mean, new utility connections from the power company, gutted it, and built it out entirely. And in 2 years, 2 years time, the FDA was there inspecting it. In between the start and the finish, I mean, there was about 128,000 pages of documents that had to be generated, to qualify all of the work, all of the employees, to, written procedures, validation protocols, analytical methods, that have to be drafted, reviewed, approved, executed, reviewed, approved. I mean, it's like, people can't appreciate the amount of paperwork that has to be generated in order to meet the standard that FDA requires, just for them to review. And so I want to show people, I want to give people a real world example. And all of these documents are related to the Pfizer vaccine, the mRNA shot, and all of these documents are the most critical distillation of all of that work that I'm describing for this product that I worked on, but for the mRNA shot. So I want to go through the process. I want to show people what these documents are. These documents, I'm going to make them available to everybody to download. And before we even get started, before you get bored and go away, if it gets too dry or technical, and I'll try not to do that, but if you took the vaccine or if someone that you know took the vaccine, whether you feel great, whether you feel the best you ever felt, or whether you're wrecked from it or whatever, download these files. And the reason I'm telling you to download these files is because Pfizer does not want you to have these files. Pfizer does not want these files to go into a discovery in any courtroom, regardless of any emergency use authorization or informed consent, because by the time I get done with this conversation, if you still believe it's possible that anyone in this country, other than people like me, who worked in the pharmaceutical industry and understand these documents and had access to these documents, in spite of the fact that I never worked for Pfizer and really shouldn't have access to these documents, if you believe that anyone other than someone like that could actually provide informed consent, I don't know what to say, because I believe I can prove unequivocally that nobody in this country had the means to provide informed consent about this drug. Because what it takes to inform yourself about it, you will see, is overwhelming. And the reason why I can say that unequivocally is because everything in these documents are exactly what the FDA requires for them to consider themselves informed enough about it to even come out and review the documents in person in your facility. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, all of this stuff that we're going to look through today is what the FDA demands in order to consider themselves informed. Just to visit you, not to approve the drug, just to visit you for further evaluation. If you can't inform them with these documents sufficiently that they think it's not a waste of their time to come and review your facility in person, then they won't do it. You know, in a normal circumstance, they'll say, hey, we have more questions. We need more information before we can set a schedule to come and even review your facility in person. And that may not sound like such a damning statement right now, but I think it will as you start to see the quantity and the complexity of the data that I'm talking about. Because, you know, when I say 128,000 pages of documents in 2 years, that's a small fraction of what existed for the totality of this product's time on the market. And you know, what we're going to see in these documents is a, you know, there's 60 megabytes of documents here. Some of it's redundant stuff because, you know, these are email communications with documents attached between organizations. So sometimes, you know, it's just a slightly reviewed or updated version of the same document. But I mean, this is what I got. Beggars can't be choosers, I guess, in terms of, you know, the type of hidden information that you acquire. So, but again, in the normal course of pharmaceutical manufacturing, and I'm going to lay it out timeline wise, this is not for an emergency use or an informed consent. This is just if you have a drug that you want to take from a compound that you suspect has therapeutic properties, right, to a drug that's approved for a therapeutic indication for manufacture and distribution as a prescription pharmaceutical product, because the process is crazy. And, you know,
Yes.
And the process itself is one of the reasons why you have drugs like fentanyl and carfentanil, which don't really need to exist, okay? I mean, fentanyl is a synthetic opioid. Carfentanil is a synthetic opioid. Morphine is an opioid, right? Morphine is tried and true in terms of pain management. It's, you know, it's why if your leg gets blown off when you step on a landmine in the military, you're going to get morphine. You know what I mean? Like, just that's going to be what you get, and you're going to be real glad that you did not build up a tolerance to it by abusing fentanyl or whatever else, you know, when you need it. I mean, that's one thing I've always advised people. Like, you know, if you want to do drug, and I don't care what people do in general. I think all of these drugs, you know, I think heroin, cocaine, I mean, all these drugs should be legal for a variety of reasons, but not the least of which is because I think, you know, if cocaine was never illegal, crystal meth probably wouldn't exist. You know what I mean? If heroin and morphine, opium in general, I mean, if opium was never made illegal, I'm not sure that heroin would exist. I mean, I guess it would, but I'm saying in terms of being like this huge worldwide market or whatever. But
Right. We were talking about blackmail inflation in the last one. When you don't give the public access to certain things that you know that they will want based on what they already know of the properties of a drug like an opiate can do, you increase its value. If you were to put it on the market, there'd be an inflation of it. It wouldn't be as desirable, but also it's just even from a child, you tell me I can't have something and I want it even more. There's that aspect of it. There's a lot of arguments that come into this when it comes to just making them something that we should have as adults the freedom to decide whether or not we want to take or whatnot. And then you also have the legality of it where they start cutting it with other things that make it more dangerous. So there's a conversation to have here, but I understand what you're saying, that we could
yeah,
go into another area of discussing whether or not drugs should be legal or not legal.
well,
And then you have the synthetic aspect of fentanyl, and carfentanil is like what, 1,000 times stronger than fentanyl, which is already super
right. But
freaking strong.
so you got to ask yourself, why does carfentanil exist? Okay, because from a people are worried about fentanyl overdoses, right?
Right.
You used to hear about heroin overdoses a lot, but nobody really cared because these people are druggies, you know.
Yeah.
So, but you hear about when you think about morphine versus fentanyl, the main difference is that it's a lot stronger. So, where it might take a gram of morphine, maybe it'll take, I don't know, a milligram of fentanyl.
Right.
And again, carfentanil, it would take, a microgram, right? So it becomes much more challenging to titrate, to compound fentanyl, and then even more so challenging to compound carfentanil. This becomes dangerous to have it in your lab. I mean, if you're working with morphine in a compounding pharmacy, you can work a lot more leisurely in terms of the type of PPE you wear and the type of infrastructure that you have in the environment there, and the type of procedures that you have around, just maintaining your safety and the safety of the other products that you make. When you go to like carfentanil, I mean, the danger level is crazy because it doesn't take much and you're dead. I mean, if you just get a whiff of, some atomized particles or some, particulates in the air or whatever, you're dead. So you ask yourself,
Yeah.
why did they keep making it more and more dangerous? Like, what's driving that? If morphine works, why do you need carfentanil, given that it's so much more dangerous? Well, the reason is because you can't patent morphine. And so you can't, you can make morphine, but so can anybody else. And then
Because
you're
it's a naturally occurring substance. Is that what you mean?
It's just it's a substance that can no longer be patented, right? It's not a new chemical entity anymore. So when a pharmaceutical company owns a new chemical entity, buys it or patents it because they've developed it or researched it themselves, you've got 20 years of market protection based on that patent. 20, it depends, but 20 years on average. Now, in that 20-year period, you've got to take it from a new chemical entity to an investigational new drug, which means you've got to get, people, pharmacokinetics experts and pharmacology experts that will say, and doctors to say, okay, yes, this drug, from a pharmacokinetic standpoint, from a chemical standpoint, seems like it will have these impacts biologically, and some of these biological impacts will be therapeutic for whatever the indication is, cancer or whatever it is, right? So you have a new chemical entity, you think that it works in this mechanism on this indication, and then you go to an investigational new drug where you need to do clinical trials. So then you need to have the clinical trial documentation approved by the FDA, the plan for it. So you got to have doctors on board. You got to have a plan for how many people you're going to use. You got to have a plan for, it's all, the protocol's got to be developed. And that's a job in and of itself. You're talking about tens of thousands of pages and thousands of hours of experts and whatever that you've got to pay. So the cost is adding up. Then you got to do those trials. Phase 1, which is just sort of physicochemical stuff, right? Phase 2, where you're testing it on animals. Phase 3, where you're testing it on humans. And each of those phases is, you've got to generate all the data with the protocols, then you've got to review all of the data, then you've got to summarize all of the data, then you submit all of the data to the FDA. The FDA reviews all the data, asks you all these questions, and this is not happening like, we'll hear back from FDA tomorrow. I mean, that's not how it works. It takes time, right?
Takes years, right?
Oh yeah, a decade. I mean, easily.
Yeah.
Right?
So you, pre-COVID, you worked on projects that took the whole phase 1, phase 2, phase 3.
Well, I mean, I didn't deal with clinical trials, okay, except for whenever we had to manufacture placebo for, right. That was that. I don't deal with clinical trials. I didn't deal with clinical stuff. I'm just telling you that
you built the facilities where they were conducting this stuff,
where they were manufacturing the actual drug. Talking. This is I'm just speaking about the early phases of the regulatory pathway to give you an idea of why fentanyl exists. So because it takes 12 to 14, years from the time that you patent this new chemical entity until the time, if everything goes well, until the time that you can put it on the market, right? Now in 6 years, you've got to make it profitable to have patented this thing 14 years ago. And you've only got 6 years of market protection to do it before somebody else can manufacture a generic and undercut your pricing, right? So why do fentanyl and carfentanil exist? It's because they're so chemically analogous to morphine that instead of doing those phase 3 clinical trials on humans, all they really have to do is prove comparability between fentanyl and morphine. And then they can leverage the phase 3 trials of morphine, which means fentanyl will get 14 years on the market under patent protection instead of 6. Carfentanil, when the fentanyl patent runs out, will still have 12 or 14 years left on it because they skipped over all of those, a lot of that timeline that is required to go from a new chemical entity to an approved pharmaceutical, because they're saying, fentanyl is roughly the same as morphine, and we can do this comparability protocol and prove that to you. So FDA, will you allow us to leverage the clinical data associated with morphine for fentanyl? And the FDA says yes, in exchange for, however many millions of dollars, right? Or whatever, the FDA allows them to do it. And so you can see why, even if it's more dangerous to formulate, even if it's more dangerous to the population, it's orders of magnitude more profitable over time for whoever owns the application for fentanyl and carfentanil, because they double or triple the amount of years they have on the market under patent protection, as opposed to if they do it the same way, you would with a new drug. So that's why you see these sort of synthetic analogs of pre-existing drugs coming onto the market and then being marketed so heavily, because they're recouping more money. Because, and then they need to prove to the insurance companies that you'd rather use fentanyl over morphine, which is a separate thing in and of itself. And that's a whole scam in and of itself. I mean, if you want to get into like the insurance companies and stuff, one day we can do that. But I want to give you this information because when you look at the pharmaceutical industry, you've got to not jump to any conclusions of why things are done the way they're done, and instead ask yourself, like, counterintuitively, what could be the reason that these things are done this way? And 9 times out of 10, it's going to be a corporate reaction to a regulatory obstacle, right? I mean, to give you another example before we get into the Pfizer stuff, and I'm not trying to delay it, I feel like this is foundational information that will get people in the right mindset to kind of understand what I'm trying to communicate today. Because you're not going to be able to really glean a lot technically from just glancing at these documents, and that'll become clear. So I'm not going to sit here and read you, 400 pages of section 3.2.S.2.4 from the prior approval supplement, because it's not going to make sense to show it to you, show you where you can get it, and tell you why it's important. But a big topic of conversation is high fructose corn syrup in your soft drinks, right? And when you consider that pound for pound, in terms of its sweet capacity to sweeten by volume, right? A pound of granulated sugar, or I'd say enough granulated sugar to sweeten, let's say, a gallon of Coca-Cola, versus enough high fructose corn syrup to sweeten a gallon of Coca-Cola. Granulated sugar is much, much cheaper as a raw material. Way cheaper. High fructose corn syrup is, twice or more as expensive as granulated sugar is. So you ask yourself, why do these big soda manufacturers spend more to use high fructose corn syrup if number one, if people are concerned that it's not healthy for them, and number two, it's a more expensive raw material? Because both of those things are true. Like, I think in general, if Coca-Cola was like, hey, we're only using real sugar now, high fructose corn syrup is out completely, right? People would be like, yes, that's great. In general, people would be like, nobody would really complain about that, right? So you ask yourself, why does Coca-Cola spend more to use high fructose corn syrup? And it's because the costs of using granulated sugar aren't in the raw material costs. They're in the manufacturing costs. And particularly when you scale up to the size of batches, like I presume Coca-Cola must run. What drives that is the reason why granulated sugar, or simple syrup, or sugar water, or whatever, is more expensive is counterintuitive, and you really wouldn't know it unless you've worked in the industry, and specifically in an FDA regulated industry where you have to deal with the challenges of maintaining cleaning validation on equipment that you use to manufacture, and maintaining environmental monitoring standards that are required. So, and I'm talking about microbial contamination. So the way a regulated manufacturing facility will operate is, and let's talk about Coca-Cola or whatever, some soda manufacturer. You'll have giant storage containers where your raw materials come in via whatever rail car, truck, and you inventory them, and these are your raw materials that you manufacture with. So ultimately, you're going to have, whether you're taking granulated sugar and mixing it with water locally to make some sort of solution, or you're bringing in high fructose corn syrup, you're going to have a big tank where you store this, right?
Right.
The difference between having a big stainless steel tank of sugar water and having a big stainless steel tank of high fructose corn syrup is that if you were to ask me, let's say you have a tank of each of them. The tanks are identical, stainless steel, top of the line, compliant for pharmaceutical or for food manufacturing. And you say, okay, I've got in this tank over here, I've got high fructose corn syrup, and here's the specifications for the high fructose corn syrup. So, I can look at it and say, okay, I understand the physical properties of this ingredient that you're storing. And here's sugar water. And you were to say to me, which one of these would you prefer to utilize in a manufacturing process, in a liquid manufacturing process? I would always choose the high fructose corn syrup. Here's the reason. Because high fructose corn syrup, much like glycerin and some other materials, some other liquids, has an incredibly low water act. There's no water. High fructose corn syrup is miscible with water. If you put water into high fructose corn syrup, it will go into solution. Like, they'll mix together. They want to mix together, right? And you can keep adding water, and you can measure what's called osmotic pressure. And that's the amount that high fructose corn syrup wants to suck water into it. You probably have heard of reverse osmosis water filters. I mean, it's the same principle. Anytime you have two different liquids, with different properties, when they come together, one of them wants to mix with the other one, perhaps, or neither of them want to mix with the other one, like oil and water. But the difference in between the sugar water and the high fructose corn syrup is that if you take a dropper that has E. coli in water solution, live E. coli, and you put a drop in the sugar water and you put a drop in the high fructose corn syrup, the E. coli cells in the sugar water are going to have a blast. They're going to love it. It's exactly the type of environment they want to live in. They'll proliferate, and you have a contaminated raw material. The E. coli cells in the high fructose corn syrup are going to be destroyed because the high fructose corn syrup is going to suck all of the water right out of the cells through the cell wall via osmotic pressure, and that'll be the end of the E. coli. It's guaranteed. It's you can validate this high fructose corn syrup. You don't have to do microbial swabs on the inside of the tank every week or every day. You don't have to plate those swabs. You don't have to wait 14 days for them to grow out. You don't have to get the data back off of that. You don't have to have your laboratory technician write all of this stuff down. You don't have to have your QA and your QC people review it and sign off on it. And you don't have to have the FDA come and look at it. You don't have to ship samples. I mean, the year before the FDA came in and inspected the facility that I built, I was spending $35,000 in shipping one specific type of sample for that year. One microbial sample from, this had to be taken basically every time we did anything. Before you did a batch, during a batch, after the batch, $35,000 just in shipping costs. That doesn't even include paying the analysts to do the assays, paying the people to review it, storing all the data. And what if you get bad data, right? Then you've got to go in. So you see, Coca-Cola is manufacturing millions of gallons of soda, on a weekly basis or whatever. And right. you cannot get back microbial data fast enough to say, okay, we're okay to go ahead with the next batch. By the time you wait 14 days for those E. coli cells to grow and get counted and analyzed and reviewed, if it comes back and you say, holy shit, our sugar water has E. coli in it, well, guess what? 14 days worth of stuff you've manufactured is going in the trash. Versus if you use high fructose corn syrup, there's no worries. Because you know that nothing can grow in there. FDA knows that nothing can grow in there.
Wow. So some of this is pretty mind-blowing and stuff that people don't think about. I'm not going to say it's the most entertaining aspect of things, but it's stuff to take into consideration. It's better manufacturing-wise, monetarily-wise, it sounds like, time-wise. But it's also, because of it not being like an example like E. coli, beneficial to E. coli, it's not also necessarily beneficial to human living tissue.
Right, because but that's not what's driving the evaluation, and that's my point, right? You've got to always be looking for situations, particularly with FDA and pharmaceutical manufacturers, where you might be thinking something is driving their decision making, and in reality, it has nothing to do with it. I mean, the argument about whether or not high fructose corn syrup is healthy enough for Americans to consume on the level that they do is an incidental argument that is occurring because high fructose corn syrup is so much cheaper to use in a manufacturing setting for a giant corporation that you're going to have to decide whether or not it's healthy enough for you to take, right? You got to, this is your informed consent is on you again as to whether or not you want to drink high fructose corn syrup, because it's not there, because it's better for you. It's not there. It's there because it's better for manufacturing the thing that you're eating and drinking.
And I would assume most people that know what you know are fully aware of this, but that's
I figured that. I'm telling you, I had this realization about high fructose corn syrup because of an analogous situation that I found myself in with respect to with respect to glycerin, synthetic glycerin, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's sort of, I was going through like some budgetary things, you know, where I was evaluating, I'm looking like, holy shit, I'm spending so much money on microbial analysis and sample, to the point where really, I mean, I ended up building a micro lab in the facility because I was just like, wow, we're getting killed on shipping, you know what I mean? These samples. And because you got to take the sample, you got to put the sample into a box, shipping container that's validated. I mean, it's a cooler, it's got ice packs. There's a procedure about putting the ice packs in. There's a procedure that, you know, about the route that you have to ship it. It's got to go on this route. You can't be taking it to some different hub, because the only place that I know it's verified, it's validated, that you can ship this container packed the way it is with this type of sample and I'll get data back that isn't useless to me, is if UPS takes it from here exactly by the same route that's validated to there, and that's what I paid for. And I said, wow, you know, we're getting killed on this stuff. But and that real, you know, when I was dealing with that, I don't remember exactly what caused me to realize, but I remember I was sitting at my desk and I leaned back and I was like, oh my God, like this is why they use high fructose corn syrup. This is why. It has nothing to do with anything, you know, with respect
health standards or making sure it's the safest product possible.
Yes. And so, I mean, when I say my career was unique and I really didn't belong there, I mean, it's like these people were constantly reminding me that, you know, I'm like uneducated and, you know, and I played into it. I mean, I was happy to tell her, oh, you know, I'm just a dumb country boy or whatever. But it's funny, you know, that the dumb country boy that everybody's happy to like joke about being the dumbest person in the room in all of these meetings is the person that they put in front of the FDA. But it's because, you know, I'm the fall guy. And like I said, that was the role that I, you know, that's how I made my career. So I'll be the fall guy, sure, because I'm not going to fall, right? If I'm willing to be the fall guy, it's because I'm pretty sure I'm gonna knock this out of the park. And if I'm, you know, these people were happy to believe that I was the dumbest person in the room, and I don't think I was. You know, I don't think I was the dumbest person in the room. I mean, it doesn't
you were
look
the
like
one with a conscience and that was aware of things and willing to pay attention to it, while other people might even have a thought like you just said, this is why they use high fructose corn syrup. Oh, well, go about my day.
Right.
You actually thought about it and like, damn, this is why people are getting sick. This may be why people are getting diseases. Maybe this is why people are losing their energy and all this kind of other shit that happens because of this.
Well, what it's a clear indication of is that the FDA is FDA approved doesn't mean what people think it means.
Right.
You know, people hear FDA approved and they think somehow it means the FDA says it's safe for you to put in your body. And I mean, there's some of that, but in reality, what it means is that the FDA thinks it's safe for them to allow the company that is manufacturing and selling this product to put it to sell it to you, and that's it. Because they say, the FDA says, well, if this company we've reviewed enough information to know that this company is, if everything stays the same as the snapshot that we've reviewed, that FDA has reviewed and approved in terms of manufacturing and distribution of this drug, then when anything goes wrong, we're certain that the liability will be on the drug maker. In other words, FDA stands for fully distributed accountability, in my opinion. And FDA approval just means that there's no unanswered questions about who's responsible if anything goes wrong. And primarily, there is no question about who's responsible, to which the answer is the FDA. I mean, that's the thing. As long as
so my question to you is like, because in the conspiracy world, we like to think like the elites are poisoning us on purpose. But is it so much of that, or is it the system is corrupted by the idea that we have to, you know, it's mostly about making money and making this stuff and making the most money as possible while using the least amount of money to manufacture these kinds of things? Is it that corrupt system that is creating the poisons, or is it also is it a multifaceted thing where they are literally putting poisons in for a specific reason? Because we're going to get into vaccines and what the agenda was there, because we're already almost 50 minutes into the session. What is going on here? Is this a cutting the cutting the corners with money-wise things and a manufacturing issue, or is this literally also literally an agenda plan to put certain things into the human body that can cause harm?
Well, I think, the answer is yes, right? It's all of those things in different situations. I mean, the truth, the fundamental truth of it is that it's possible for a pharmaceutical company to make it, to push a product through the regulatory pathways in such a way that the FDA can't protect the consumer from being poisoned. That's the truth. That's the fundamental truth. If a pharmaceutical company has enough money, and let's say Pfizer, for instance, if a pharmaceutical company has enough money and enough motivation, whether it's good, which is just purely profit motivated, right? That's as good as a pharmaceutical company will ever be.
That's the growth system.
Is that, and then if the chemical entity in question is also good, meaning it actually does what it says and doesn't do anything else, then you won't get poisoned. But if it's not, then you will. And the point is, the FDA can't guarantee that. The FDA doesn't guarantee that the products that it's approved aren't poison. In fact, the FDA approves products on a regular basis, and has a great many products that are approved for clinical indications, manufactured and distributed, that are poison. Chemotherapy is poison, right? And there are products that are known to be dangerous, that are known to be, but of course they're only ostensibly for situations where not having them, because of whatever circumstance you're in, is more dangerous.
Right.
I don't think people realize that marijuana federally, and a lot of people don't realize, I guess, marijuana federally is a worse. It's a Schedule I drug, whereas cocaine is a Schedule II. And the reason that cocaine is a Schedule II drug is because there are clinical indications for which cocaine is prescribed. Cocaine is on every ambulance and in every emergency room, because it has a couple different clinical uses for which there really just isn't anything better. So, in that sense, the FDA says cocaine is more useful and less dangerous than marijuana. You know what I mean? But I guess the DEA doesn't agree or something. So, you've got to realize that just because the FDA approves something, it doesn't mean it's safe or effective.
Right, which is what we're going to get into here with this paper that goes into the COVID-19 vaccine.
The FDA's challenges, again, I'll say bad things about pretty much any federal agency, but the FDA in particular, I have enough insight to know that, I don't envy them trying to do whatever job it is they're trying to do, even if everyone in the FDA was a good person trying to do the right thing. Maybe it's impossible, to really do it well. I don't know.
Yeah, because money rules, and there's powerful organizations and powerful people.
Yeah, if you're doing the right thing, someone's spending money to try to overwhelm you or corrupt you, and that's pretty much comprehensive.
Yep, because it hurts their bottom line in some other area.
So, I want to go through. Let me tell you what this document is. First of all, on the screen is this is between the Committee for Medicinal Products for Human Use, which is part of the European Medicines Agency. It's sort of like the FDA has a bunch of different departments, like the OPD, OPQ, like the Office of Pharmaceutical Quality is a big one, and then you have like the Center for Biological Evaluation and Research, Center for Drug Evaluation and Research. They have all different branches or whatever, and this is the European version of that. So these emails were from, and I think this one was probably, you'll see the date of this report, 11/19/2020, right? So November 19th, 2020. This is after the treasonous election here in the United States, after you know, all that bullshit. So when people say, oh, it's Trump's vaccine, it's Trump's vaccine. No, it's not. It's not really Trump's vaccine. I mean, the election was already stolen from Trump in November of 2020, and they were still, even in Europe, still just reviewing the manufacturing data on the scale up from laboratory to commercial scale, as you'll see in these documents. And what this document is, there is when you have a drug manufacturing facility and you've manufactured your validation lots, which is like, you said we have the spec, everything's been agreed to by the FDA about the drug, the specification, you're through the clinical trials, you have the facility built, commercial scale, you validate the commercial scale process, all the data looks good. You put together a document called a PAS, a prior approval supplement. And that's a supplement to the investigational new drug and new chemical entity application. It's a supplement to the file of this specific drug. And what the prior approval supplement is all of the data and all of the documentation and all of the references to other documentation that FDA will need to review to get a holistic idea of, the state of your manufacturing capabilities. And then if they think it all looks good from a review perspective, then they will come to actually inspect your facility and review your documents in person. And that'll take a week, sometimes more, 5 days of sometimes 2 or 3 people every day, all day, just doing nothing but basically digging around in your shorts as an organization.
Right.
So it's an exhausting task for everybody. But the way the COVID warp speed worked out, right? And I don't know if Donald Trump even really, sort of, I don't know if he understood this at the time or if he even needed to, but I suspect he could have if he bothered. So, the warp speed thing basically allowed, one of the things that FDA will allow you to do as a pharmaceutical company, the first thing they'll allow you to do if you need to expedite or if you've got, a drug shortage issue, something where you're like, look, we can't manage the normal timelines, right? Like, we can't deal with this. We send you something and we have to wait 3 months to get something back and then back and forth. By the time that happens, some other thing, we'll run out of drugs on the market. These people will not, with this issue, will not be able to get their treatment or whatever. So sometimes FDA or, any regulator, I guess, EMA, will say, okay, you can do a bunch of things concurrently and we'll bring more staff on, to concurrently review these things so that we can expedite the process. And that's a pretty, it's not commonly used. FDA doesn't like to do it. I assume the EMA doesn't like to do it, but there are circumstances where there's just no getting around it. And they have to provide that or else they're the ones that are holding up, people that may need this drug or may have had access to it before and now are not going to have access to it. So these are the types of regulatory responses that they do have the ability to provide. And that's what they did here for warp speed, I think. That's what they sold warp speed to Donald Trump as. Hey, because you can imagine Donald Trump it's going to resonate with him if, people from the FDA or the CDC or whatever come into his office as the president in, 2019 or whatever and say, look, Mr. Trump, as well as I do, that the government bureaucracy is a joke in terms of efficiency. In reality, if we put good people on this and really dedicate ourselves to it, and throw the full sort of force of the FDA at this, we can do it at warp speed. You know what I mean? Like, we can do all of these things concurrently and get this vaccine out by next year. Now, meanwhile, these people all know that they're going to. The people I'm talking about would be people that are aware that they're going to get Trump out of there somehow in 2020, right? So, like, if these conversations are happening in October or whatever of 2019 about warp speed with Donald Trump, I'm assuming that that's the way they're selling it to him, because they also know that, like, by January or February of 2021, he's not going to be in the picture anymore. And right. So the fact that they're not going to actually do all of the things that they said they would do concurrently as opposed to successively, at all. They're not going to do any of it. There's no going to be no clinical trials. They're just going to lie about it to everybody. That they're, they knew, some group of people knew that that's how they were going to play it. And I think that, maybe Donald Trump knew if he was capable of spying on those people or however they were communicating about it in back channels. But it would be hard for anybody that wasn't in the pharmaceutical industry to hear that. And because it is true in a way to say, look, like if we do these things concurrently, if we really put a lot of resources on it, we'll be able to get it done faster and more efficiently than we would otherwise. That's true. I mean, it's not a lie, right? Like, it is true. Of course, it's going to go faster than if the FDA doesn't bother to try to make it go fast. I mean, that's like, it's just inherently true. So it's not necessarily a lie, but I think, it's one of those types of lies that you probably hear a lot of in Washington, D.C., where, it's like, I'm going to tell you what I can that is the truth, and then stop there, right? Because if I keep going, then I'll have to start lying to you.
Right.
But so, I mean, I'm gonna scroll through this document and kind of just hit some high spots, but I want everybody that sees this to understand that. And let me try to show one more thing real quick, because this is the this is the sort of informed, this is the information that people got, which they were told constitutes informed consent, or constitutes enough information for them to have given informed consent. And in reality, it's not. The information that everybody was given was kind of a bunch of it was a bunch of BS. Why am I having a hard time sharing this thing?
You got to stop sharing of this one and then start sharing.
Oh, jeez. All right.
So I'll remove that. Stop sharing on your end, and then you have to reshare the other one. There was all kinds of BS being put out by all kinds of people, even Fauci, Biden saying if you take this, you won't get COVID, and then himself getting COVID multiple times.
Yeah,
like there was all kinds of bullshit like that. Now he's not an official person in the sense that like he doesn't speak for the FDA, he doesn't speak for the regulatory, blah blah blah. But he was the president of the United States.
Yeah. So treason. I mean, can you see that now?
Yep.
Yeah. So let me hit play on this. I mean, this is the information that people were given.
Okay, turn on the view. I don't know if you.
There's no sound. There's no sound. This file, 100% effective, 30% effective, 10%. You know what I mean? You're supposed to have made. This is what gave you the ability to provide informed consent if you're an average person. It's just a bunch of fucking news articles telling you it's 100% effective, it's 90% effective. You know what I mean? And look what starts happening. They're telling you it's 100% effective whenever they don't have any clinical data at all. And then as people start taking it, they're generating clinical data, and then the numbers go down. The numbers go down and down, down and down, right? And so, I mean, all of these contradictory statements regarding the effectiveness of this vaccine at doing the safe and effective functionality of this vaccine. This is the type of trash that people were expected to leverage whenever they make their informed consent to take this drug, right?
Right.
And I mean, it goes from, hey, it's 100% effective to it doesn't work at all, basically.
Yeah.
And
God, it breaks my fucking heart, dude.
Right. And then let's compare that. Compare what the people that took the drug were given to make their informed consent decision versus what the EMA and the FDA require for them to provide informed consent, not to take the drug, not to give the drug to people, but simply to come out and review, to spend their time and effort to review your manufacturing facility, right? So
Right.
look at the difference in the quantity of data that's provided to the patient, the people that are supposed to be consenting to use this untested. Whoa, what have I done here? What is going on? How do I unselect? Oh, geez. I don't know what I did here.
Maybe take it off edit.
Yeah.
Oh, that didn't work.
So, oh yeah, I can just use these. Executive summary, right?
Mm-hmm.
1.1. Only the non-clinical dossier was submitted and assessed during the first rolling review cycle. So the first rolling review cycle is in this November of 2020. The second rolling review cycle would have been probably 60 or 90 days later, close to when Biden allegedly was inaugurated, right? And guess
Right,
what?
and it was very strange because when Trump first brought this stuff out, there was all the Democrats and Biden and these dumbasses saying they were never going to take Trump's vaccine.
Right.
And then once they got into power, then it was like push, 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 get them out, get them out, get them out.
Yeah,
There was even a weird thing with Johnson and Johnson and all that kind of stuff, which seemed that there was some kind of change. And that's never come out. But then the other thing is that I have to imagine, because Trump has to know this stuff, but he has to be being told that this still saved millions of lives, because even though some people haven't responded well to the vaccines, it was still worth it to go forward. That's what you get. That's kind of the spiel you get when you're in a doctor's office and they're proposing a certain drug to you. While this might impact your health side effects wise, and in the long term, it's still deemed more beneficial because of the circumstances that you're in. That's the only way that I can make some more excuses for Trump, even though I hate doing it.
Well, there's no need to make excuses for Trump, is what I'm telling you. I mean, this documentation proves that even the regulatory agencies, basically, by the time the election was stolen in November, and I truly think that Donald Trump was not even. I think he had already handed things over in November. And I'll tell you the reason. I talked about Donald Trump and why I give him, the grace of managing his own plausible deniability. One of the reasons that I do that partly is because he removed all of his plausible deniability before 2020 with respect to the election fraud. I mean, the executive orders that Donald Trump wrote about, and I think it's 13848, or 13818, I can't remember, but that executive order lays out exactly how the election will be stolen, right? Mm-hmm. And for him to sign that and say, hey, I know how they're going to steal the election, and then have the election stolen, and then, hand over the nuclear codes to the treasonous pedophile Joe Biden, that's treason. If Donald Trump did that, he did treason too. And he removed his plausible deniability to say, well, I didn't know I was doing treason. I didn't know I was handing it over, to a guy that stole the election, because he categorized exactly how the election would be stolen beforehand. That's my opinion, right? So I don't think Donald Trump handed things over turnkey to the Biden administration, because if he did, he already basically made himself complicit in their treason by calling it out before handing it over.
This is very, very controversial what you're saying here, Biscuits. And to me, I don't like it, because I think that Biden fully did become commander-in-chief. However, that's been the contention with a lot of people online. But what you're saying right here, I still don't see how Trump, if he was secretly, even if he handed it over to the military during Biden's reign, and Biden administration never had the nuclear codes, why was Biden allowed to allow everybody in the country? Why was Biden allowed to
because
send all of our money to Ukraine?
We could get into that another day, right? Because I could talk about it for a long time. I'm just telling, and I may be wrong, but I'll tell you what, I'm not wrong about the fact that Donald Trump put himself into a position where if he handed all this stuff over to Biden, I think it was treason. That's what I'm saying. And so I don't think he would have put himself in that position, because all he had to do to avoid that is not write those executive orders.
Right, and then he could have done the Insurrection Act and made a
Well,
stand.
then he could have just said, "Hey, I mean, you guys say he won. I guess I'm just going to hand him the keys and go about my business." I
It's
don't know,
crazy that he would write those things though, and then go on to state over and over again that
because
there
you
was
see
election
that
fraud.
puts him in a position of accountability. It removes his plausible deniability about the election being stolen, which is one of the things that's always supported why I have hope for him, because he didn't have to do that. In fact, it made a lot of people think worse of him that he categorized all of this election fraud stuff that he thought was about to happen. And then it happened, and nothing happened in response.
Right.
So, but for me, because I think I identified with the position that he put himself in, where he said, "Hey, this is what's going to fucking happen," right? And I know about it. I already know. I don't deny it. I know that this election is going to be stolen by these means, right? I have the intelligence, and I'm putting it down here. That's illegal. Don't do it. If you do it, it's treason. It's a crime. I mean, that's what that executive order did. And I said, okay, like he knows what's going on. He's not pretending he doesn't know what's going on. And to me, in my experience, when you're dealing with anything regulated federally, someone who's willing to say, this is the reality of the situation. These are the risks inherent. These are the ways it's going to be challenged. It's going to be attacked, or it's going to be undermined. And I know about it. To me, I identify with that position, right? It's not and that was one of the reasons. That was one of the reasons why, even though I was so disgusted that we made it to 2019 without, seeing these people getting dragged and on trial for everything. I read those executive orders, and I read every executive order from Donald Trump's first term, or first 4 years or whatever. I read, it was just because I was in the zone in terms of, I lived in a world of documents for almost a decade with all this FDA stuff. So it was like, oh, another 400 pages of documents to read on Saturday night, no problem. You know what I mean? I was just like,
you're primed for it.
Yeah, it was just what I was doing. So, so that. I identified with that position, and to me, I felt like Donald Trump was eschewing plausible deniability, right? And in a regulated industry, when I was dealing with the FDA, man, if I was working with someone or had a vendor or a client or whatever, and I got that impression from them that they're like, oh, here's a problem, I understand it, and they would put it in writing, like, I understand what's going on here, I have some ideas for solutions. I'd say, this is great. This person is confident, secure, willing to think, willing to make a mistake, right? Like, this is a person that can be productive and effective, and is prioritizing being productive and effective instead of covering their own ass and avoiding accountability. Because someone who's covering their ass and avoiding accountability is more of a liability than an asset to any project, if you ask me. So, but I've digressed somewhat.
Right. I would love to have that conversation maybe in part 3. And I think we're at we're almost an hour 15 into this one, and people really want to get into what you think of the vaccine.
Yeah, it's nice that there's a timer on this one, because I have, a constant.
Give you an idea of where we're at.
So again, the very first sentence that you read here, in November of 2020, only the non-clinical dossier was submitted and assessed. Meaning, the reason it was submitted and assessed without the clinical dossier is, of course, because there is no clinical dossier at this time, and everybody knows that. There was no clinical trials, at least nothing that Pfizer wanted to submit, because they killed all the animals. Everything died. So everything that you see here is just physicochemical manufacturing process related data. So, they characterize the finished products, preservative-free, multi-dose concentrate, to be diluted for intramuscular injection, intended for 5 doses, right? So you can see that things are fluid even from this point. And the reason that things are fluid from an indication perspective, from a administration perspective, in terms of the dosage, et cetera, is because, again, there was no clinical data. The clinical trial was the informed consent. I mean, if you enter a clinical trial as a test subject for a drug that's never been tested before, they will inform you of all the potential risks known and of the fact that there are a great deal of unknown risks. And then you must consent to participate in the trial. In order to participate in the trial, a couple of things must be true. You must potentially receive placebo without your knowledge. Potentially, right? And that's dictated in the protocol that's approved by the FDA. You must provide certain types of feedback. Data acquisition must occur, right? Or you're not going to be part of the cohort. If you take the drug and then just don't show up for any of the tests or other follow-ups and stuff, your data is not going to be part of it. So, everybody that took this drug, everybody that took this vaccine, provided informed consent technically, but I think, as you'll see, there was no way that they could really be informed. So you'll see this has, it's giving you a summary of the ingredients that are listed here. I mean, a lot of these ingredients are going to have just CAS numbers or these ALC numbers and things like that, where they're already sort of characterized as excipients that are used in other drugs and things, preservatives. I mean, there's no preservatives allegedly in this drug, but.
Right. And this is a document that you found online, but that would have been an internal Pfizer document. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah. I mean, if you look in the folder where the rest of these documents are, you'll see the documentation associated with the submission of these files to EMA through their UDRLink electronic submission gateway. So the validation that these files are real is also contained in these folders, right? Everything to prove to you, to prove to a lawyer, to prove to a judge, to prove to the FDA, to prove to the EMA that these files are real, that they're contemporary, that the dates are correct. I mean, you can see some of the employees' names throughout here. These are real, and these are timely based on the dates on the files. And yeah, I found these online. I never worked for Pfizer, never would.
Right.
Now, I mean, I guess probably at some point in my career, I if the money was right, I would have. But now, I mean, there's no way. I mean, certainly there's no way.
Right.
So I'm just going to some of this stuff. Information on the manufacturing process for the specific manufacturing sites not been provided. So again, I mean, this is some kind of summary stuff, and I mean, you can get into this is specifically to the manufacturing of the RNA through what they call a linear DNA template, which basically uses E. coli cells to it kind of forces this RNA spike protein to be built inside this broth through, sort of certain series of pressures in the manufacturing process, in the fermentation. So that, well, I mean, you could read it. You can read everything here. The cell banks involved in the plasmid manufacturing process are described. MCB and WCB qualification tests are listed and included in the morphologic genotypic identity restriction map analysis and DNA sequencing, absence of contaminating bacteriophages, viability, plasmid retention, and plasmid copy number. I mean, and this whole document is going to be like this, where, because it's not one expert that has written this document, it's dozens and dozens of different departments that are highly specialized and compartmentalized, providing individual pieces of data about this very complex multi-phase manufacturing process, or about the evaluation of the product produced by this manufacturing process at various stages. Okay.
Right. And so would this be the kind of material that you would get? Like, I saw people going in to get their vaccine, and they were obtaining these, printout, like they folded 1,000 times and like filled with information. Would this be the kind of information that they would get?
That information is a package insert or patient information sheet.
So it would be different than this.
It will leverage, it will likely reference, copy and paste even some small portions of this, but that document is one that is also specified by the FDA as something that has to be provided to the patients for every product. You'll get a package insert with every prescription drug that you are prescribed. I mean, it's a regulatory requirement.
Right. I was seeing some though where there was actually like a printout. There was literally nothing on it. They were opening it up and like it was void of any letter, any word. Like it was crazy. And then when you talk about this and you showed that video where the numbers went down, it went from 100% efficacy or whatever you say to down to, either down to the 50s. Would that mean, since they lacked trials, that they would have had to have used placebos as well? Even in the live population, there would have had to have been different kinds of batches with different purposes.
Yes. I mean, ultimately, and that's easy to do now, I mean, because of Pfizer would have had to, by 2019, Pfizer would have had to been fully compliant with the DSCSA, and I can't remember what the acronym is, the Drug Serialization Control and Standards or something like that. But it was referred to colloquially as the serialization project because every pharmaceutical company had to become compliant with this new guidance on serialization. And the serialization was a program that, whoever manufactured your packaging, or I say whoever actually packaged your final drug product, and all of the intermediate stages, if you were shipping it all around, had to be compliant with this system of serialization where at 6 different points in the process, in the aggregation of the drug. So you have the drug that you get when you're prescribed a drug comes out of a bulk container. If the pharmacy you get it from, counts the tablets or capsules out and puts them into a script bottle that you get, they came out of those tablets or capsules came out of a larger bottle that gets sent to the pharmacy to fill from. That bottle will be that's the smallest unit sold essentially for that particular packaging configuration. So that will have it will have a barcode and a serial number. It'll have a lot number that's associated with all the way back up to the manufacturer. But at each aggregation point in the process, there will also be a serial number. So you'll have a container serial number, you'll have a pallet maybe serial number, and then the pallet will be associated with a truckload or a bulk, whatever.
Absolutely.
And so on until you get all the way up to a manufacturer's lot number for the drug product, which may also have multiple drug substance lot numbers in it. And all of those lot numbers will have lot numbers for every raw material, every manufacturing component, and everything else associated with it. So in practice, if you're compliant, and FDA says you're compliant with the DSCSA, which I did, completely brought those systems online from nothing to fully compliant for multiple pharmaceutical products, totally under my authority, right? So I'm telling you I'm an expert on this because I've done it, and FDA agreed I did it well. And I mean, I didn't do it all myself, but I'm saying these were my projects to do, and I succeeded. So what I'm telling you from experience. The situation should be that if someone takes any drug that you've manufactured and something bad happens, right? They have an adverse event or they die or whatever, or there's a piece of glass in it, anything bad. You should be able to look at that serial number that's on and trace, not only trace it, but trace everything about it. I mean, it functions as a thread that you can pull from the end user's side, and it will connect back to everything that could possibly affect the quality, efficacy, or patient safety of that product all the way back. And that's great, and it works great in that sense. from the perspective of a mass clinical trial, it also works really great. You follow what I'm saying? Because now when you go to get your first dose of that vaccine, you've got to sign your informed consent and you're doing it probably, I guess, like, I don't know where people really got vaccines. It seemed like there was like drive-through clinics and things like that. I mean,
man, there's people offering free donuts and shit. It was like,
right. So, I mean,
where the heck were you going to get that crap?
But the point is, you're in presumably you're like in a line of people, right? So you're
Right.
already, you get in a line of people, you're already compelled to not sit there and hold the people up behind you, and so they hand you, this information sheet or whatever. You're really supposed to inform yourself about all of this information. When
Exactly. So there's all this information, but then you talk about those lines. We saw lots of lines, people sitting in cars in lines.
right.
And then even in those cars while they were waiting, that's when they started using swabs. I mean, there was various ones where there was tented areas and there's pharmacies that were doing it, but there was literally drive up ones where they ran up to you and then they got you to do the swab to test to see if you tested positive. Can you say something about those swabs just because somebody has asked at this point?
Well, yeah, they're a joke. I mean, in every sense, clinically, they're trash in terms of generating real clinical data. It's absurd to think that I only ever took one of those tests, and it was court ordered because it was in 2024, which was so insane. But the judge ordered, he said I couldn't testify in this trial in January of 2024 without getting a COVID test. And I'd never had one of those swabs. And I'll tell you what, it made me furious, but I did it because, I had to do it. I mean, it had to be done. But it irks me to this day that I ended up having to do that. And the fact that I'm so mad about having to take one of those tests, I just can't imagine about people that took them all the time. I mean, and I could really go into telling you why those things were clinically, why they were bullshit, but also sort of operationally and philosophically why they were evil in a sense. But you can, polymerase chain reaction, which if you weren't doing one of those quick tests, right? If you were doing a test that actually had to be analyzed in a laboratory, it was called a PCR, which is a polymerase chain reaction test. And the data that you get from that test is totally dependent upon a setting in the analytical equipment called cycle rate, where you can dictate essentially whether you're going to get a false positive or not by just adjusting the cycle rate of the method. And interestingly, initially, I want to say for like the first maybe year of the pandemic, the cycle rate of that PCR test was one thing, and was I think, I don't remember exactly what it was. I probably got the information somewhere, and then the method was updated, and FDA approved a change to the method for that test a year later, where the cycle rate was, I would say, corrected, such that a lot of false positives would go away.
Right.
And the COVID test to me was the swabs and whatnot, was a mechanism that was intrinsically guaranteed to give inflated positive test results.
Absolutely.
Just on the method alone. In practice, additionally, because of the way the test, because of how it was done, I mean, they jam that thing so far back into your sinuses and really rub it all around. So you're talking about an upper respiratory infection as the underlying illness that you're testing for. And then you're making people wear masks all the time, which causes increased risk of bacterial infection. And then you're inflaming their sinuses on a daily basis or weekly basis with this foreign object that you're putting there and scraping on it. So you're statistically increasing the likelihood that they're going to get bacterial infections or simply, some sort of inflammation in their sinuses from putting this thing in there, even if it's not contaminated with anything, just from the physical abrasion. And then putting a mask on, statistically increasing the likelihood they're going to experience some sort of bacterial infection or upper respiratory or sinus infection. All of the symptoms of which will go right along with a false positive COVID result from the PCR test that has a cycle rate that's far too high.
Right.
So you get a false positive, you get physical symptoms, right? You have people that believe that COVID's a real thing, that it's a
Right.
real pandemic, that it's everywhere. People are catching it left and right, when in reality, people are just being given the idea that what they've got is COVID left and right. I mean, there's no more influenza. It's only COVID, right? If you got the flu in November of 2021, oh, you've got long COVID. Like it
Right.
was totally like everybody just forgot about everything else because no one on the news media or whatever talked about anything else. But yeah,
Yeah, a
and
lot of it was psychological, and I have a degree in psychology, and people are very suggestible, and especially in a situation like this where you have media and you have professionals telling you this kind of stuff, which are often paid scientists, paid doctors, or whatever on your mainstream television, telling you that it's everywhere, and he's telling you exactly some of the stuff some of us may have heard, but this is exactly you're getting it from the manufacturing professional standpoint of how they operated this. Now, what else do you want to show from like this
yeah,
particular document? I have plenty of questions for you still, and we're about an hour and a half into it.
um, data for this, the process development data for this section is pending, right? I mean, it's just crazy.
So
I
in
just
order to get informed consent, you would pretty much have to like not that anybody's going to read all this, but you would pretty much have to be informed about almost everything that's in this more internal document, wouldn't you?
yes. So I mean, let's get to this because this is important. Table S 4-1. This is specification, and this is the you know this is this document, the approved specification, the specification of the drug that the FDA and the manufacturer agree to, is the most critical document in a drug manufacturing operation, because this is the characterization of what the drug must be. You set these standards based on all of the laboratory data from making the drug at a lab scale, um, and then you have to constantly be meeting these standards. If you want to change a specification, I mean, the documentation that you got to submit for that to justify it is crazy. So this is the specification of the drug, and you'll have you know um, different types of physical characteristics, chemical characteristics. You'll get into very complex analyses depending on the type of material you're talking about. So clarity is sometimes that can just be, you'll put it into a calibrated light box in a container that that's validated for this method, right? Everything has to be documented and validated and qualified and approved and so on and so on. So you'll say, hey, this is clear. It's not brown. It's not yellow. It's not hazy. It doesn't have particulates and so on. And then there'll be a specification, and there'll be some acronym, right? Depending on whatever I don't even know what NTU is in terms of clarity, but coloration, not more intensely colored than level 7 of the brown color standard. And so what you'll find is that you will always have, when it comes to a specification, some type of reference standard. And there are NIST reference standards. There are USP, the US Pharmacopoeia reference standards for a lot of things. And so there's color standards, and what that will be is like a color wheel or a color palette that you'll have, like if you go to get a tooth replaced or something with porcelain, they'll come up and try to match the color rather than just put pure white in there, because that will maybe look as bad as the one that's already there if it stands out enough. pH is pretty standard. People probably know what that means. UV spectroscopy. This is when you start to get into the stuff that's critical in terms of the specification. RNA concentration, and this was one of the things that freaked me out so badly about, and the data that I'm referencing is within these files. What freaked me out about the mRNA shots in the first place. So you remember in the beginning of this document, they had said that initially they wanted to do 5 doses, right?
Right.
So when we get into the purity portion of the specification here, Look at this spec right here. The protein purity, the spike protein, the mRNA protein is the critical thing in this drug, right? It is the thing that when it's introduced into your body, your immune system that deals with allergies, the IgG4, the immune system that will cause you to react to a pollen that you're allergic to, or something like that, recognizes that spike protein as something that you should be allergic to and attacks it. And then allegedly, and the reason that they call it a vaccine is because they assumed, or they asserted, I guess I'll say, that having been primed to react that way by this RNA that matches the COVID spike protein, you will effectively be vaccinated because your body will naturally be allergic, essentially, to the COVID virus when you're exposed to it, right? So the way an attenuated virus vaccine works, like the flu vaccine, basically, right? You get exposed to attenuated flu virus, which can't proliferate fast enough to make you sick, but does cause your body to react to it and to develop the systems to react to it whenever you're exposed to a live virus. That's basically how it's
right. It's like basically creating a memory for your immune system. The next time it encounters that,
it's just like a dry run for your immune system. Yeah. Like there's not enough real virus there to make you sick, but there is enough there to let your immune system prepare itself to deal with a real virus should it be encountered.
Right. And do you believe that's a real thing?
I'm not.
You're not a virologist, so you wouldn't be able to speak in that, I guess.
I don't know. I mean, I understand why people argue that it's not. Right. I'm not the person to. I don't know.
Me neither. I've just watched so much stuff on these kinds of things that it's like it is an interesting debate, But we can move on.
It's a good thing to ask people a question that you think they don't know the answer to, because if you get an answer other than I don't know, or a very compelling answer that you say, wow, I'm surprised this person knew the answer to that, I wouldn't trust those people. And I don't know. Right. Listen, I've interacted with a lot of PhDs, very, very, highly educated and allegedly highly intelligent people. I don't know anybody that I don't know I've ever met anybody that I would be able to ask that question to and trust the answer that they gave me, frankly. So I don't think I'll ever know whether attenuated virus is a good vaccine or not. I don't know. Right. But I'll tell you the thing that scared me about the mRNA thing, because as I've said, it makes you allergic to the protein. Fundamentally, let's distill it down to that. It makes you allergic to the protein that's introduced. But look at the spec that I've got highlighted here. The only thing that's required of the protein that's in this drug is that it is greater than or equal to 50% intact RNA that matches the template of that. Do you follow what I'm saying?
That they're holding up as the COVID.
Right. So it's perfectly acceptable based on this specification that half of the protein, which you will be allergic to after taking a few doses of this product, is just something other than what you're trying to be vaccinated against. And that's still passing.
Those aren't good odds. And what is this? Capillary gel electrophoresis is what it says underneath analytical procedure.
Yeah.
That's the protein.
That's the analytical method that you use to determine the distribution of the target protein within the solution that you're testing. So after you manufacture the drug, one of the products that I worked on used gel electrophoresis, and it basically, what you end up with is an image of a gel stain, and the marker that indicates the molecular weight of the protein in the solution will coalesce on the scale from the assay, such that you can tell where the how heavy most of the protein that's in the sample is, and from a molecular weight perspective, and
Is
therefore,
that a physical gel like what was on the tests, or separate?
no. This is an analytical assay. This has, in other words,
So this is what's being done in the labs?
yes, to determine whether or not what's been manufactured meets the specifications of what was set out to be manufactured.
Okay.
So, and I'm saying the specification is that, let's say, I think the commercial batch size for this was initially 37.6 liters of drug substance. So theoretically, it should be 37.6 liters of solution that has some concentration of mRNA proteins in it that match the profile of the COVID-19 spike protein. Okay. And the point is, the acceptable concentration is half. So the first shot you get is going to be 50% COVID RNA, if everything works right, minimum. And then the second shot that you get, because you had to get 2, if I recall, right?
Right. Pfizer and I think Moderna both required 2. I don't remember what.
Right. Which is interesting because their initial spec was 50%. It's
Right.
interesting that you require 2, meaning that they want you to get 100% of the volume of the mRNA protein, but they only guarantee that each shot is going to contain 50%, because
So
that's
the percentages are not working out at all.
Because that's either all they can manufacture, they can't get a better result than that, or because they want to leave themselves the opportunity to give you 100% equivalent of some other protein. And that was the thing that I worried about, because the reality is, I mean, I can give you the names, I can give you the uniprot.org. There's a website called Uniprot where you can go and basically look up any protein that's been gene sequenced or whatever, amino acids, everything. It's an amazing resource. But I mean, I can show you, there are proteins that exist. There's a protein that exists in the human female body naturally that it occurs in women that have, like, let's say a woman has 4 male children in a row, right?
Okay.
She's very likely to develop after that the presence of a protein that essentially causes her body to treat proteins associated with the X chromosome as something she's allergic to. And I mean, this has been studied. What happens is it becomes statistically more and more likely that the male children of a woman who's had 4 or more male children already, the subsequent male children will be homosexual, will be, far more feminine biologically, because of the fact that the mother is effectively becoming allergic to X chromosome as a result. And so one of the things that freaked me out about this vaccine was that basically, you now have the ability to mimic this type of thing. You can make people's bodies allergic to anything that you want, including their own body, including proteins that are maybe even specific just to their own genetic makeup. And that's the real scary thing about this to me. And then the scariest thing is that 50% of the proteins that are in this alleged vaccine are uncharacterized, except insofar as they are not the target protein. Half of the fucking mRNA vaccine is uncharacterized proteins. And the entirety of the function of the mRNA vaccine is predicated upon the application of characterized proteins. Do you see what I mean? So the mechanism by which this alleged vaccine was intended to function is only being applied to half of the substance that people are putting into their body. The other half totally uncharacterized, as far as we know, right? But again, Pfizer's allowed to do any kind of testing that they want on their products. The specification only dictates the testing that has to be reviewed by the feds.
Right.
So Pfizer knows what's in every batch. Pfizer knows because they have the serialization data. They know what's in every lot. They know what's in every package. And
Do they have to get consent from people? Because they're running trials on live, they're running live trials in order to get their information. That's what they got to do. Do they ever tell people that you could be getting a placebo when they gave them these trials, these vaccines? There's one question I have.
when you mean this, when this vaccine was rolled out, were people made aware that they could be receiving a placebo?
Exactly, because how
Oh
could you
no.
not be having a placebo aspect to this
Well, you
in
must.
order to run the trials that necessary in order for them to gain the information over time?
It's requisite from a data validation standpoint that placebos were part of the cohort, part of the the people that were taking the trial. Um, you can't have a clinical trial that can be considered valid without placebo data. But there's
Exactly what I'm saying here is that, and then they ran a live trial because of emergency use, which what Warp Speed allowed them
yeah,
to
but
do.
again,
Right?
they could have Pfizer could have given everyone placebo based on the informed consent, and there's no legal. I mean,
Okay, well, so
there's
that covers what I was asking. I guess it covers that
you would
they're
never
covered.
know. You would never know in a clinical trial whether you got placebo or not. You may be able to. You may have been informed, or you may be able to infer that it was possible that you get placebo if you enter a clinical trial. But
Mhm.
your having been informed of that isn't like requisite necessarily. You know, people that go into a clinical trial often will not be aware that placebo is even a thing. They want to be taking the drug in a normal clinical trial because usually people don't go into a clinical trial just on a whim, right?
I know, right? I mean, you'd have to be making big money for me to be like,
Well,
"Yeah, I'll just go in there. And you just put whatever you want in me, bro. That's cool. As long
yeah,
as you're paying me, $10,000."
often people are being compensated, but more often than that, they really want the drug to work, which means they want to try the drug, and
Yeah,
so
because it could work, and the possibility of
right,
it could work is like hitting the lottery kind of a thing.
yeah, like
It's that
in a
mechanism in
normal
the brain that makes you excited.
clinical trial, ostensibly you would be disappointed to find out that you had gotten placebo as opposed, whereas like in this COVID-19 vaccine clinical trial, you'd be very, very happy to find out that, somehow every shot that you got was placebo. But keep in mind, people would have those vaccine cards or whatever, and they go and they fill out their information, right? And get the first vaccine, the first dose that they get, they put the lot number down or whatever. And then a couple weeks later, they'll schedule their next appointment and go and get maybe a different lot number or whatever. But all of this information Pfizer has, all this data goes back to Pfizer. And one of the most insidious things about it was that because the drug was unapproved uh, under and is being distributed under this emergency use authorization / informed consent. Again, these are like tricks of the regulatory pathway that, I mean, if whoever wanted to do this was just reading all of my emails for the years leading up to the COVID thing, and this was kind of what always made me feel so bad about my contribution to the pharmaceutical industry, even though like what I did objectively, I feel like was good, and I was proud of it at one time. Um, you don't necessarily have the ability to dictate whether or not your contribution is valuable or not. Sorry, there's a helicopter. I'm assuming you can hear.
It's all good.
Let me wait for this guy to pass. Uh,
You're
so,
good.
okay, thank you. Um, I kind of lost my train of thought, I guess.
You were feeling good about what you were doing for a while. You even
Oh
took
right,
pride.
yeah. So if in other words, if somebody was trying to manage this eventual COVID thing had been reading my emails, they would have seen, they would have been able to appreciate all of these sort of regulatory loopholes that could be exploited later, because a lot of the stuff was just things that I dealt with not as loopholes, but as roadblocks that had to be addressed. Regulatory roadblocks that you just have to address to move on. But the degree of detail that Pfizer had about all of these clinical trial people. Oh, I remember what I was going to say. Because it was unapproved, complaints about adverse reactions. I mean, let me ask you before I say this, what do you think in 2021 was the process of, like, if you take a vaccine and you have some sort of immediate adverse reaction, where do you think, and you fill out an adverse event report, right?
VAERS.
And no, you fill out an adverse event report. Your doctor might tell you that it's going to the VAERS system.
Right.
But that's my question, is what do you think happens to it when you file that report with your doctor?
See, that's where you would think it would go to something like what we learned about with VAERS. I didn't know VAERS existed until this. However,
Right.
we were learning that they weren't turning it in.
Because it's not only adverse events associated with approved vaccines can go to VAERS. When you have an unapproved product that is being distributed under informed consent, which I have managed, right? I've done exactly that with the FDA. Adverse events go to you, to Pfizer. So, or to the application holder, because the drug is unapproved. So if you had an adverse event in 2021 to a Pfizer shot, and you filled out a piece of paper and gave it to your doctor and said, yeah, I've had an adverse event to the Pfizer mRNA, it didn't go to the FDA or the CDC or some regulatory body. It went to the company that sold you, well, didn't sell you, that gave you for free, which, I mean, that's another thing. Like, what the hell is going on? It went to that company for them to review and for them to decide if it was relevant to send on to the FDA.
Yeah, which, why would they want to tell on themselves?
Why the fuck would you,
You wouldn't want to tell on yourself if it was something that you didn't want the public or anybody, especially a regulatory board, to know about.
But you see, people thought that the government was on top of this, because they don't realize that due to some regulatory, loopholes that exist, because it was never meant to be, the system was never meant to function in that way. It was never meant that you would have an untested drug being marketed, which is crazy, being marketed while also under an emergency use authorization. This regulatory paradigm was such a departure from normalcy for the utilization of all these systems that there's no way the FDA could have reacted to it in time with all the media. I mean, I watched it going on and I just was like, oh my God, like, and I try to post like, hey, your adverse events that you're reporting are not going to the FDA. People like Cat Turd and all these influencers. I'm like, look, I have this data. I have this experience. And I send emails. I mean, I don't even know how many, like, I will tell you what's going on if you will tell other people. Stop taking this thing, man. Like, do not take it, because even if something happens to you and you think you're going to be like, oh, I'll send it off, I'll get to the bottom of it. No. It's going to the fucking company that owns the drug. It's not going to the FDA. They'll never see it, man. The only time adverse events associated with the mRNA shot were going to the FDA, were going into the VAERS system, was after the trade name Comirnaty or whatever was approved. And the only reason the FDA piecemeal approved the trade name before they approved the drug was because that's how long it took them to say, holy shit. They were looking at all this stuff. I assume they've got to be looking at all of the people reporting adverse events online, right?
Right.
While at the same time seeing what Pfizer was giving them and saying, wait a minute, like, this is, so you're giving me 2 pages and here I've got, 150,000 that I can look at online where people are reporting that, literally have dropped dead or whatever. So they tried, I think, to deal with it that way by approving a trade name so that they could then kind of close that loophole. But I mean, the damages, by that point, you're a year, 18 months into the biggest clinical trial that had ever been. Pfizer already had the data they needed. It's already done, because they're not looking for regulatory approval and all this stuff. They're moving at warp speed. I mean, Pfizer was moving at warp speed during
Yeah, it
2020.
might have been free to us, but governments were still paying for all this shit. Our tax dollars were still paying for it.
Oh yeah, I mean, dude, it's
That was the
free.
argument that warp speed was the
Yeah,
largest transaction in history from government money to pharma
yeah.
that's ever been done.
And let me tell you too. I mean, I want to say like this mRNA technology has a lot of nightmare potential, but the truth is, and I think all the data that were generated from this gigantic clinical trial could be positively leveraged to really probably turn this technology into something that's super beneficial for a lot of different indications. But it will take people that are actually well competent, experienced, and also not corrupt, being given access to all of this data. And I don't think that's going to happen because the data was generated in a criminal operation, if you ask me. So I mean, it's sort of fruit of a poison tree in that sense, even though it may be the most valuable clinical trial that's ever occurred. It's also unlikely that it's ever going to be leveraged to really extract that value from a healthcare perspective. I'm not saying
Right.
from a financial perspective. I'm saying from an actual clinical perspective, I don't think you'll ever be able to extract that value because Pfizer, there's too much liability for them to actually allow that data to be released.
Just like we were saying with fentanyl, just like we were saying with high fructose corn syrup. There are
Right.
reasons why. The
Yes.
corrupt system will not allow for that mRNA technology to be utilized maybe the correct way, that maybe it could have forms of beneficial
Yeah.
application.
They'll definitely be able to use it to make everybody's kids gay because,
Because it changes
well,
DNA, right?
I'm telling you that functionality is self-evident.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's what we've been seeing.
there's so many functionalities of this mRNA thing that's self-evident. I mean, liver and you could create one that will just make people allergic to certain liver enzymes, and if they get it, they'll just die. It's crazy the potential that it has. It's crazy. I mean, if you can read and understand enough about the manufacturing process, it's crazy how personalized it could be, down to something that is only effective on even a single person with a unique genetic mutation or something, and so you could potentially come up with one of these vaccines, and go and give it to a village full of people, knowing that 99 out of the 100 villagers are going to have, it's going to be effectively a placebo for them, but one of them, that maybe you don't like, is going to drop dead within days, right?
Right.
I mean, from the same material.
Yes, that's what they were talking about, that you could target literally the genes of a race that you didn't want anymore. And
I
a
mean,
lot of the
but
races,
it's of a person, is what I'm saying, within a race, right? If you
you could
have,
target a specific individual. Yes.
yes, I mean, it
And
could,
then I had touched on it. I think it was before the first recording, and you're not too aware of this, so we're not going to get into it. I just wanted to put it out there. But some people call this a bioweapon in the conspiracy space. We'll say that. And then there's another argument that it is a bio interface or a
yeah,
biological interface. And we're not going to get into that discussion, but I wanted to bring it up because it is one that I'm getting into when it comes to like the synergists and the Sabrina Wallace and some of that information, that they are literally using it as to up your antenna and to interact with nodes on the network in your own body, your chakras, your aura, your biofield, they're under your skin. We've got telehealth, digital twins, all these kinds of things coming into play when it comes into the medical world. That'll be for a separate discussion.
yeah. I mean,
But I wanted to at least bring it up.
I want to get into it because I mean, Charles Lieber, I think I mean, I would love to talk about that guy eventually, but I agree with what you're saying. I mean, I don't think it was rolled out with that intent, but I think I'm trying to, I mean, in the same way that you could argue that, like, a house isn't made of concrete necessarily, but concrete is underneath it, right? I
Right.
think I think that this material, this mRNA technology, is foundational for a lot of it. Can be foundational for a lot of these types of things that you're talking about, and so people are putting it into their body, and the materials that are the constituents of that, and the interaction with those constituents within the body is part of the information that Pfizer was trying to determine through this clinical trial. Because, I think people make the mistake of thinking that a clinical this really was a clinical trial, and people make the mistake of thinking that it was done specifically to do something to society, when in reality, from Pfizer's perspective, I think it was done to extract something from society. And I'm talking about the data associated, because they know they've got this product, and theoretically, they know what some of the potential is, right? Like you're talking about. I mean, I think that there are people that understand this product at a high enough level at Pfizer, and whatever whoever really owns Pfizer and is
Right.
really dictating these sorts of moves in the market, et cetera. I think they understood that they need more information, and I think they understood
Right.
the potential of this dictated that this was the way to get it, because it's,
Yes.
I mean, these people never kill one bird with one stone, because that's a waste, right?
Right.
So I mean, if they can do a clinical trial and start building infrastructure within people that maybe they don't even understand yet, but that they know they'll probably be able to leverage later, or maybe they will, as long as that action is also doing something else for them. In this case, like, the whole COVID thing was exploited by a variety of different sort of branches of the same kind of criminal organization that started it. You know what I mean? Like, everybody just piled on to exploit the situation because it was a crisis, and I think they knew that was going to happen. But fundamentally, from Pfizer's perspective, this was a clinical trial to get data, not to do anything else. They wanted to get the largest amount of clinical data that they possibly could about this drug and you see the disparity in between the lot to lot variation in terms of adverse events, and like, it's like, how bad is my batch, I think is the website, right?
Right.
And some of the lots, it's just like, holy shit, you hope you didn't get that one, because basically everybody that got this one particular lot is like dead or fucked up badly.
Yes.
Meanwhile, some of them, it's like, no bubbles, no troubles,
Right.
And the point of what I'm saying is that Pfizer knows exactly the differences between each one of those lots in a way that is so high resolution. They understand every physicochemical property of every one of those individual lots with such precision that the data that they can extrapolate by knowing exactly how all of the people that were involved in this clinical trial reacted to it. I mean, you can't even put a price on it. If Pfizer survives as a company, having done what they've done to people, and maintains their intellectual property, you can't even put a price tag on the amount of money that they'll be able to make from both weaponizing this as well as refining it from a clinical perspective.
And I think that's exactly where we're headed. I mean, now you also have the talk about this mRNA technology to combat cancer, and we've found some of these batches, at least,
It's
causing turbo cancer. It's causing the problem that now you're going to go and fix with a new mRNA technology that I can't believe Trump on his second day brought out and discussed. And anyways, like, I have people that, on my channel, I think it's probably more 60-70% don't trust Trump. I'm still on the fence about it. There's a bunch of things that I want to talk about, and we're at a certain point in this where I just wanted to say I think a lot of this is compartmentalized. Who was the Lieber guy that you brought up?
Well, look, let me address the compartmentalization thing, because you're absolutely right. I mean, the entirety of the pharmaceutical industry, and I think every federally regulated industry, basically functions on compartmentalization, parallel construction, and classification effectively. I mean, the people that are generating the data for all of these specifications and stuff on this vaccine are almost like assembly line workers in a chemistry lab or a
Right.
microbiology lab. I mean, they may not even know the product they're working on, right? It's just a number to them because it's been obfuscated internally, because Pfizer doesn't want everybody knowing anything. I mean, and that's why I say my experience in the pharmaceutical world was unique, because I was in the company that I was at, nobody wanted to be understanding anything. And I was like, I'll understand everything. I'll take control of everything. And I did. I mean, when I got fired, my title was general manager. But I mean, as far as, when the FDA came there, it was, the Form 482 was addressed to me, when they came to inspect the place. And so, I mean, I think I was the foremost expert on that product. And that's probably not the way that it should have been. They should have had other people in there that were doing that. But I respected the fact that I never consider myself an expert on anything in that industry technically. I consider myself an expert on the distribution of operations and responsibilities to people that were demonstrably experts. I'm an expert at putting people in the right place in order to be effective. And then I'm an expert at understanding the systems that they have to utilize thoroughly, so that, and I can fix those systems to allow people to be effective. And that's what caused that place to function. And it can be done. I mean, as I said yesterday, 21 CFR Part 11, the regulations that FDA that apply to the manufacture of prescription drugs, you can do it the right way. I mean, what's amazing is the thing that I got fired, the decision ultimately that I got fired for not forcing, was, while from the executive perspective, you could say this is cutting corners and saving us money. I could prove that it was going to be more expensive and more inefficient to do it that way than to just keep doing things the right way. But it couldn't be proved to the people that I had to prove it to, because their mindset was that, hey, the FDA is the enemy. Everything that they say is stupid. What the decisions that we come up with are right because we're close to the issue, which is bullshit, because they're not close to the issue. They were hands off the issue for years. Just letting me handle it. I'm close to the fucking issue. The people that, work in this facility are close to the issue. They understand their roles. They understand what they're doing. And if you do it in a forthright fashion, and you can do compliant manufacturing, that is, I mean, it's a good thing. The question is whether or not what you're manufacturing is actually doing what it says it's supposed to be doing. Whether it's, like with this mRNA thing, is it even half what it's supposed to be? Is it acceptable that half of it is something else? So I don't know how much more you want. There's, like I say, I can go.
You want more on this document?
Yeah, let me just go. I just want to scroll through. So this is one of them, and I want people to go, to this link and just take a look. Download these things, and if you've been injured, find a fucking lawyer that has taken the vaccine and go to them and say, here is information that Pfizer does not want made public. Read it. Have the lawyer read it and say, now that you've read all of this, do you think you provided informed consent when you took this vaccine? Do you think the legal standard of informing you of the reality of this drug had been met, considering the documents that you've just reviewed are what the FDA and the EMA consider an effort, but not sufficient to inform them? So if this document, if all of this document, which is just a fraction, right? If all of this document isn't enough to inform the FDA to consent to putting this drug into the bodies of American citizens, then why is the amount of information that American citizens got when it was time for them to consent considered enough? How can that be? And I mean, the answer is it can't. If the person that you're asking that question to is going to be honest with you, it can't. No judge could say that. No, and I'll tell you, man, because it's been so long, it might be the right time. I mean, the informed consent thing is bullshit. You in terms of a contractual thing, just like every contract that people have with a bank over a mortgage or a credit card, but even more so, the contract that's being referred to as informed consent for this vaccine lacks both consideration and a meeting of the minds. It lacks the fundamental ingredients of a legally binding contract in the first place, because again, this information was not provided. But more beyond that, the necessary context to understand this information is I mean, it's as rare as a unicorn. I mean, the fact that I had the fraction of it that's necessary for me to come to the conclusion that I did, in addition to the fact that somehow or another, I ended up with all of these documents that I wasn't even supposed to have in the first place. So I had a very unique work experience that's probably maybe unique in the United States in the pharmaceutical industry. And I had highly rare access to documents that I wasn't supposed to have access to in a timely fashion. And through both of those things, it was clear to me that that I was, number one, informed, and as a result of having been informed, would have been clinically insane, suicidal even, to consent to taking that drug. The same drug that's being marketed on late night TV and on the news and on Facebook, and that if you post anything negative about it, you get deplatformed. The same drug that, the CDC is telling you you must take because it's an emergency. I'm saying I had the information, I had the skill set, I had the anecdotal experience, and I had the actual data in a timely fashion to inform myself, and I don't think any fucking body else did. That's my opinion. So, if you think that you got bamboozled and informed consent, I'm telling you, go to this link, download these files, put them on a fucking flash drive before they're gone, before this account gets banned, before I get banned from wherever I'm at, before Booma gets banned, before any of that. Put it on a flash drive and put it in a safe place, because you never know, man. And I'm telling you, Pfizer does not want these files in any sort of legal discovery. So, you might not change the world, but if you're in a bad place and you got hurt by this stuff, you might be able to apply enough leverage so that Pfizer will change your world financially just to make you go the fuck away. And maybe that's the best that you can do. I don't know, but I want you to do it. If you can, if people who took that vaccine can get paid by Pfizer, I want it to happen until Pfizer doesn't have any money left at all. I mean, I want them fucking bankrupt. I want them destitute. Like I want to see Albert Bourla homeless on the side of the street so that I can, run over him. I'm saying I want these people destitute. I want them destroyed. I want them to not have any bank accounts. I want them to be banned from fucking Cash App. I want them to be banned from every platform where they're totally fucking isolated, and strap a mask to their fucking face and let them sleep in that and live like that for months. Because I don't even think they are vaccinated, dude. I don't think the people that work for the FDA are vaccinated. I don't think the people that own pharmaceutical companies got vaccinated. I don't think politicians got vaccinated. I don't think any of those people did. And I'd like to know. I'd sure like to fucking know.
Right. Give us their batch numbers. Prove it to us what they took. Because I think a lot of it was saline and a lot of it was for show. And a lot of it was to get their lemmings to follow them and take what they said to take.
Absolutely.
And it's still a problem. And in certain areas, I've heard that even in California, that they're still running people into hospitals and putting them on ventilators and doing the same protocols that are horrendous. And I cannot believe it to this freaking day. And you're not hearing nearly the amount of podcasters talking about it. And they were for a while, and it was hardcore at a time. And now it's just on to the next. Now Trump's here to save the world. And what's our responsibility? This link is going to be provided. As you heard Biscuits say, you're going to want to get a hold of it and then maybe save it offline. And I don't know.
I've got it saved. If this account gets banned, believe me, it'll be back up and available again. I'll keep doing it as long as I have devices. I mean, I go through them, bro. I mean, people say I'm paranoid and stuff like that, but I'm telling you, like a laptop will maybe last a year if I'm very careful with it before it starts doing shit that is just, it's like, what is going on, like stuff. Files start getting deleted. I mean, I have so many copies of the stuff that I try to have copies of all over the place, on this Pfizer stuff, flash drives, what I mean? It's stored online in various places, encrypted and put places, because I've just been dealing with this shit for so many years. I mean, I've been targeted by, I think, institutional electronic surveillance. I mean, I don't even complain about it. I don't really post because I don't want to be dismissed as a crazy person. But it already has happened. I mean, everybody in my life basically has dismissed me as a crazy person already, which is crazy to me because, it's like some of my family members were, when they're getting this vaccine, and I'm thinking, like, what would it take if someone in your family, right, who built a pharmaceutical company, who dealt with the FDA, who has the information from this company, who's read, thousands of pages of documents that only the FDA, the EMA, and Pfizer actually even know about, is telling you do not take it, and you still will take it because fucking CNN said so. I mean, to me, it was just like, I said, I don't even exist anymore. Nothing I've ever done even matters. No one even listens to me. Why do I even talk to people? Why do I even speak? It's pointless. I'm wasting my fucking energy talking to people because what I'm saying doesn't make a bit of difference. Even if I can show you, Yuri Bezmenov talked about this, right? He said the whole goal is to get Americans so demoralized that even if you show them the truth, they won't believe it.
Right.
They won't. And that was my experience in 2021 about the vaccine, about Hunter, or in 2020 about Hunter Biden's laptop, and in 2021 about the vaccine and stuff, is that no matter what you can prove, no one fucking really cares.
Right.
No one cares. I mean, it's like you see some of these videos where people are in line to get the vaccine, and someone would just fall out and they'd be wheeling them out to an ambulance. Somebody from further up in front of the line is just basically like having a seizure and is coming out on a stretcher, and people
stay
are just
in line and go right in.
They're just watching like cattle in a chute waiting to be slaughtered. Like you just say there's nothing going on in the heads of these people. They're not processing this data.
Right, and my account's small. I'm sure they got the audio on these for the algorithms, and they're probably but at this point, it's been long enough. It'll be interesting to see.
Well, you got to remember that the AI. I forgot to mention this the other day. The AI scans audio too, because every time you upload a video, the first thing that this other streaming site or even like Rumble and probably I assume Substack or whatever does is generate a closed captioning file.
Yes.
And that closed caption file is immediately evaluated by the Hive AI or whatever the proprietary one that, these big streaming sites might use or whatever. It's the same thing. So, a video is a series of images that's getting scanned by this AI. It's a series, it's a text file that's being generated from the audio to be scanned. So, I mean, there's no way to contribute content to the internet without it being evaluated by these same types of programs. I think that, but again, this is like in 2020, 2021, they were focused on this particular thing, right? So this was getting shut down all the time.
Yeah, we'll see what happens
now. I think maybe they're focused on some other things or whatever. And
I'm tall enough where maybe they'll just look at it and be like, yeah good try, guys. And,
but again,
but I might just upload this one just to the Rumble. I mean, the Rumble's my big account, but at the same time, like if they took it down, that would show us where we're at with things.
You're posting.
And then I would still have my Substack and my Odyssey in those.
You're posting the link to a mega upload account, which is owned by me. The files are provided by me. So I mean, this has nothing to do with whatever the content of these files are. I mean, I take full responsibility for them. So this is not something that you've acquired, or I'm just putting this out there. you got them from me. As far as I know, they're legal to have. And so as far as you know, they're legal to have. But if they're not, hey, if anybody has a problem with it, fuck you. You know what I mean?
Right.
I'm putting them out there, and if you delete them or whatever, I'll put them out there again. So if you want to stop me, I guess you know what you got to do. And I mean, there's nothing but air and opportunity between us. So whoever is interested in that path, I don't give a fuck. So
Right.
that's where I'm at on it, you know. And but I recommend people, hey, get it while you can, I guess is what I'm saying, because I don't know how long I'll be here. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there we go. Let's land here. We have so much more to talk about. I had topics that I even wanted to bring up, but since we're a little over 2 hours and 20 minutes in, let's close this session. So we had talked about possibly doing a live for the next one. We might even do one more recorded and then a live. We'll make that decision. But at some point, I think I want to bring B on for a live with you guys. And so look forward to that. Definitely get into the video description, get that link and check it out and see if you want to grab those. And once again, Biscuits, it's been an honor to have you on here, and I look forward to getting to number 3 to see. We'll see if this account still exists when we go to number 3. But this was episode 2.
An interesting clinical trial we're performing here on our ability to put stuff out there. So
yep, that's why I'm only going to put this on the Rumble for now, and then we'll find out. We might be fucking around, and we might find out. So anyway.
Well, I'm looking forward to it either way. I appreciate it, bro. It's always good to talk to you.
Yeah, awesome, man. All right, well, God bless you all, and we look forward to catching you on the next one. Peace.
Bye, everyone.